Welcome dear students for this next lecture on chapter study of Pila globosa. In previous lecture, if we take a recap, we have studied the respiratory system of Pila globosa, the organs associated with the respiratory system, and we studied two basic types of respiration, that is aquatic respiration and aerial respiration. In today's lecture, the study objectives will be to study the salient features of blood vascular system in Pila globosa, organs and accessory structures of blood vascular system, followed by structure and functions of these organs and accessory structures, and study of cephalic aorta and visceral aorta. So let's begin with today's topic. So let's begin with the salient features of blood vascular system in Pila globosa. So if we see this blood vascular system or circulatory system in Pila, it is made up of sinuses or lacunar type or a open circulatory type of a system. Now this animal is adapted to dual mode of respiration, that it can live in water with aquatic mode of respiration and it can live on land with the terrestrial mode of respiration, also called as aerial respiration. So it has evolved open circulatory system, which is seen in crustaceans, insects, mollusks and other invertebrates as well. Here the heart of Pila globosa is simple and it is tubular in shape, and it is made up of two chambers, one auricle and one ventricle. Heart is the receiving chamber and it is responsible for the distribution of blood to the entire body. So it receives the oxygenated blood and it is then distributed to the different parts of the body. The blood here is having a respiratory pigment that is called as hemocyanin, which has copper in its structure and it is in the dissolved form. Now if we see, the oxygenated blood in Pila is bright blue in color and the deoxygenated blood is colorless. So these are the just important salient features of Pila globosa blood vascular system. Now we start with the details of this blood vascular system. So if we see, it consists of pericardium, heart, arteries, sinuses and veins through which the blood flows. Now let's study each organ or structure one by one. So let's first begin with the pericardium. So pericardium is a thin walled ovoid sac. If we see the position of this pericardium, it is present dorsally on the left side of body wall behind the mantle cavity, and this is like a covering of the heart. So it is a thin walled sac-like structure which encloses the heart. Now it extends anteriorly to stomach and up to the digestive gland, and it encloses two chambers of the heart. So heart is double chambered, that is having one auricle and one ventricle, and it also covers the aortic arches and aortic ampulla. Now what are these structures? We'll study in next few slides. So it lies in the left side of the body wall, which is the largest wall of the body, and it is situated behind the mantle cavity. Now, so this is a bag-like structure surrounding the heart. So there is a space present between the heart and the pericardium, and this space is called as pericardial cavity. This pericardial cavity is a very deep cavity which communicates with the posterior renal chamber. Now, renal chamber is the part of excretory system of Pila through the reno-periocardial aperture. So there is an opening which is called as reno-pericardial aperture. Now, this pericardium extends up to stomach and digestive gland, and it corresponds to the coelom of annelids and vertebrates. So this is the coelomate type of cavity present in the Pila globosa. Okay, now let's come to the structure of heart. So in this diagram you can see the structure of heart. So it is made up of two chambers. The upper chamber is called as auricle and the lower chamber is referred to as ventricle. Now this auricle receives the blood through the three veins, and after that you have this two aortic or two aortas. One is visceral aorta and second is cephalic aorta. So if we see this overall structure of heart, it is long and two chambered, that is having single auricle and a single ventricle. It is found enclosed in the pericardium. So pericardium is the outer covering which encloses this entire heart. Physically, this heart is said to be myogenic in origin. So myogenic means it is made up of specialized muscle cells within the heart. So this is all about the overall structure of the heart. Now we come to the first chamber of the heart, that is called as auricle. So in this diagram we can see this first oval shaped triangular structure is nothing but the auricle. So it is triangular and having thin wall, and it is highly contractile chamber of the heart. Now this is the receiving center. So all the oxygenated blood is received by the auricle first. So it is the blood receiving chamber. Now auricle lies in the dorsal part of pericardium. So the position is dorsal part of the pericardium. Ventricle is situated just below the auricle. So after the auricle you have this oval shaped ventricle. So they lie in the same vertical axis. Now in all three veins open into this. So the first vein is the pulmonary vein, which bring the oxygenated blood from the lung or the pulmonary sac. Second vein is the tenedial vein, which bring the blood from the tenedium or gill, and there is a third vein which brings the blood from the renal chamber. If we see the position of this pulmonary vein, it opens at slightly lower level than the tenedial vein. Now we move on to this auricle communicates with the ventricle, and in between there is a aperture or a opening. So this opening is called as a auriculoventricular opening. So this allows the entry of blood flow from the auricle into the ventricle, and this auriculoventricular opening has two semilunar valves. So semilunar means half the size of the moon. Now the function of these semilunar valves is to make sure that blood does not flow in the reverse direction. That means always the blood should flow from auricle to the ventricle, and the backflow of the blood from ventricle to the auricle is prevented. Okay, now we come to the next important part of the heart, that is ventricle, which is the second chamber of the heart. Now, as compared to the auricle, ventricle is very thick walled, muscular in appearance, and it is a spongy oval shaped sac like structure situated just below the auricle. Now it is also contractile, that means it is able to contract and relax, and it is the pumping chamber of the heart. Now if we see this from the inner side, the inner wall of this ventricle is formed of large number of muscular strands. So this cavity is filled with the muscular strands, and due to this meshwork, the inner cavity becomes highly reduced because you will see a lot many muscles in this area. Now the next part of the heart, that is aortic trunk, arises from the ventricle. So this tubular part is called as a aortic trunk. Now once it starts, it divides into two branches. One branch is called as cephalic aorta and the other branch is called as visceral aorta. Now here also there is an opening between this ventricle and the aortic trunk, and this opening is also guarded by two semilunar walls. So these walls prevent the backflow of the blood into the ventricle. So the blood will always flow from auricle to ventricle, then to aorta, and then to the other parts of the body through this visceral aorta or the cephalic aorta. So this is all about structure of ventricle. Now we move on to the next important part of the blood vascular system, that is arteries. So in previous slide we have seen that from the ventricle arises the aorta or the aortic trunk, and this aortic trunk is divided into this cephalic aorta and this visceral aorta. Now on this cephalic aorta there is a bulb like structure which is also referred to as ampulla or aortic ampulla. Now this cephalic aorta supplies blood to the different organs of the cephalic region of the organism, and it is further having many branches. So we will study that in the next few slides, that further it goes into the body and it will divide into many branches. So this cephalic aorta has this bulbous outgrowth which is called as aortic ampulla, and this aortic ampulla is the characteristic feature of family Pilidae, to which Pila belongs. Now what is the function of this ampulla? It acts like it regulates the pressure. So it is highly contractile. So whatever pressure is required for the flow of blood in these both aorta is maintained by this aortic ampulla. So it aids in the circulation of blood and controls the blood pressure in the animal. Now opening of this aortic ampulla into the cephalic aorta does not have any valve. We have seen that there was semilunar wall present here in between auricle and ventricle, as well as there was semilunar wall present between ventricle and aorta, but here there is no such wall present. Okay, now we will see the structure of cephalic aorta in details. So cephalic aorta It basically sends arteries to the head and the buccal mass. So cephalic region. So cephalic aorta is supplying blood to the front part of the body, that is head and the buccal mass, and it from this the aorta the arteries are going into the visceral mass. So we have already seen this aortic ampulla, a bulb-like structure which is present. It is a contractile structure and it helps to maintain the pressure of the blood flow, and it is rhythmically there is contraction which helps in the circulation of the blood. Okay, now this cephalic aorta gives rise to three major arteries. So what are these three arteries? The first is called as cutaneous artery, second is called as esophageal artery, and third is called as left pallial artery. So let's study them in a next diagram. Okay, so before going into diagram, so this main trunk of cephalic aorta runs forward and crosses to the right side, and it will form many branches near the esophageal area. So these branches are called as pallial artery, or rather right pallial artery, right siphonal artery, and a pineal artery. And they are supplying blood to the different parts. So we will be studying that in a tabular form in the next slide. Okay. So here we can see that here somewhere you have this lung or pulmonary sac, and from this the oxygenated blood will be carried by the pulmonary vein, and it will enter into the first chamber, that is the auricle. From auricle it will go into the ventricle. From ventricle, now since we are studying the first branch of the aorta, that is the cephalic aorta, we will see where it goes. Now then blood enters into this cephalic aorta. Due to the pressure created by this ampulla, it will be forcefully traveling to the next arteries. Okay, now so it will first go into the first artery, that is referred to as cutaneous artery, which supplies blood to the skin. Now it will go further and it will branch into next artery that is referred to as esophageal artery, which will provide blood to the esophagus. Then you have this third artery, that is the going to the inner side, which is called as pericardial artery, which supplies blood to the pericardium and renal chamber. So alongside we will see this in a table. So the first branch is the cutaneous artery, which supplies blood to the skin. Second artery which goes to the inner side, called as pericardial artery, which supplies blood to the pericardium, that is the sac-like covering of the heart, and the anterior renal chamber, which is part of the excretory system. And the third branch of this is called as esophageal artery, which supplies blood to the esophagus. So we have seen this in this diagram. So first is your cutaneous artery, second is your esophageal artery, and third is your pericardial artery, supplying blood to the pericardium as well as this anterior renal chamber. Okay. Okay. Now from here there is another branch that comes or goes to this side of the body. First branch of this is giving blood to the pallial or rather left mantle, is called as a pallial artery. So this is a pallial artery. Then there is the second branch which gives the blood to the ospiradium, a leaf-like structure which is a olfactory organ. This is called as a ospiradial artery. and then there comes the third branch of this, which supplies blood to the left nuchal lobe. This is called as a left siphonal artery. So let's see this in table. So the left pallial artery is further divided into three, that is pallial artery supplying blood to left mantle, ospiradial artery supplying blood to the ospiradium, and left siphonal artery supplying blood to the left nuchal lobe. Okay, now there is a right branch. So we have seen this left branch. If we come to the right side branch, it will first give rise to the first sub branch, that is the radular sac artery. So here this is the sac of radula. So it is supplying blood to the radula. This is called as radular sac artery. Now the second branch is giving the blood to the foot. So here you can see this is giving blood to the foot. So it is referred to as pedal artery, which is supplying blood to the foot. Third branch gives or supplies the blood to the tentacle. So this third branch of the artery supplies blood to the tentacles. It is referred to as tentacular artery. Fourth branch supplies the blood to the eyes and eye stalk, which is also called as omentophore. So this fourth branch is called as optic artery. So here you can see the name optic artery. Fifth branch, that is referred to as pineal artery. So you can see this pineal artery, which supplies the blood to the copulatory organ of the pila. Then there is a next branch that is called as right siphonal artery. So this right siphonal artery supplies blood to this part, that is the right nuchal lobe. And finally you have the right pallial artery, this one, which supplies blood to the right side of the mantle. So we can summarize this in a tabular form. So the right branch first gives rise to radular sac artery supplying blood to radular sac. Then you have pedal artery supplying blood to the foot. You have tentacular artery supplying blood to the tentacles. You have optic artery supplying blood to eye and the eye stalk, also called as omentophore. Pineal artery supplying blood to the copulatory organ or the reproductive organ. Right siphonal artery supplying blood to the right nuchal lobe, and the right pallial artery supplies blood to the right part of the mantle. Okay, so this is all about the cephalic aorta and its branches and target organs. Now we move on to the last part of today's discussion, that is visceral aorta. So in this diagram we have seen that there are two branches of the aorta. So we have seen this cephalic aorta. Now we go to this side, which is referred to as visceral aorta. So the next aorta is called as visceral aorta. So it starts from here and it will supply, or it will have different arteries or different branches which will supply blood to the remaining part or the posterior part of the body. Okay, now the first branch of this visceral aorta is called as pericardial artery. So this is the first branch called as pericardial artery, which supplies blood to the pericardium. This is the sac-like structure, pericardium, as well as to the skin and the digestive gland. Okay, so this pericardial artery supplies blood to the three parts of the body, that is pericardium, skin, as well as the digestive gland. Now comes the second artery arises from this visceral aorta, that is called as gastric artery. So you can see in this picture, this is the gastric artery which supplies the blood to the stomach. third artery coming from visceral aorta is called as intestinal artery. So this intestinal artery supplies the blood to the intestine. Now comes the fourth artery arising from visceral aorta is called as hepatic artery. So this is the hepatic artery which supplies blood to the digestive gland as well as the reproductive organs. Now comes the next branch, that is called as renal artery. So here you can see this renal artery which supplies blood to this renal chamber. So the anterior renal chamber gets the blood from this renal artery, and then further this artery subdivides into many small arteries, and that will supply blood to the kidney and rectum. Okay, so we will see this in the tabular form. So here you can see the visceral aorta and its branches. So the first artery arising from visceral aorta is the pericardial artery, supplying blood to pericardium, skin and digestive gland. Gastric artery, the name suggests, supplies blood to the stomach. Intestinal artery, supplying blood to the intestine. Hepatic artery, supplying blood to the digestive gland as well as the reproductive organs. Renal artery, it is supplying the blood to the anterior renal chamber, and then these artery further bifurcates into very small arteries which supplies blood to the kidney as well as rectum. So with this we conclude today's lecture. So if we summarize, today we have studied blood vascular system of Pila. In that we looked at the different organs of the blood vascular system or circulatory system like pericardium, heart, arteries, sinuses, veins, and we have understood their structure as well as function. Then we understood the arteries and their bifurcation in the form of cephalic aorta and visceral aorta. In that we understood the different branches which are formed by the cephalic aorta, which supplies blood to the cephalic or the head region of the body, and the second aorta, that is called as visceral aorta, which supplies blood to the posterior part of the body, and it also has many branches which are specialized to supply blood to the specific part of the body. So with this we conclude today's lecture on first part of blood vascular system or circulatory system of Pila globosa. In the next lecture we will study the remaining part of this system in the form of blood, different components of the blood, functions of the blood and the course of circulation. Thank you for your patience here.